Hello, ELIC 32. This is Michael, and we are in Focus on Grammar 4, Unit 3, looking at Exercise 4. And Exercise 4 is on page 41. So we're bringing it all together. Simple past, present perfect, or present perfect progressive. Now, the instructions tell us that a student is interviewing adventure traveler Rafe Abad for a research project. Pretty normal thing, students interviewing professionals in the field. Use the words in parentheses to write the student's questions. Use her notes to complete Abad's answers. So we'll be going back and forth between the skeleton of the question and creating a fully formed question. And then we'll be looking at the notebook up here on the right to figure out how to answer the questions. Choose between the simple past, the present perfect, and the present perfect progressive. Use the present perfect progressive and contractions when possible. All right, so this is something that we'll need to remember as we go on, because sometimes multiple and sometimes you have choices. You can choose either present perfect or present perfect progressive, and they're both correct. But our instructions want us to try to use the present perfect progressive so that we're getting practice and getting used to using that verb form. Also, to use contractions when we have something that can be contracted. Let's get out of the drawing, and let's take a look at what we see. Actually, I want that back. Let's take a look at what we have up here in the log. First adventure trip, Lake Louise in Canada, 10 years ago. Second adventure, scuba diving trip in Mexico, cost $1,200. From hobby to business, started in 2015. Adventure travel tours along with 2 employees. Recent trips to Costa Rica, Peru, and Alaska. Adventure travel blog started last year. 1,000 readers in the first 2 weeks of this month. Travel to Africa, not yet. Okay, so we'll be using all that information to answer these questions down below. So let's see, the first one is done for us. How long you do adventure travel? So our question is, how long have you been doing adventure travel? And we see in the notebook, first adventure trip, Lake Louise in Canada, 10 years ago. So our answer is, Abad answered, I've been doing adventure travel for 10 years. And we see that the contraction is used. I have contracts to I've. All right, number 2, where you go on your first adventure trip. Now I'll get my little text field down here, and this is where I will put my answers, my questions and answers. So for number 2, the question is, where did you go on your first adventure trip? And now looking up at the log, Lake Louise in Canada was the first trip. So he would answer, I went to Lake Louise in Canada. Now, you could make it longer. You could say, on my first adventure trip, I went to Lake Louise in Canada. But and that's fine. But since we already know from the question that this is about the first adventure trip, it's enough to say simply the answer. And the answer is a complete sentence, as it is. I went to Lake Louise in Canada. And we already know that it was 10 years ago. Number 3, how much your driving trip in Mexico cost. So these are things that are completely in the past for questions 2 and 3. Because the second, it was a trip that was in the past. So we will ask, how much did your driving trip in Mexico cost? And in the notes, we see the answer to that, $1,200. Now, we should make it a complete sentence. So if this were a conversation, you might just say $1,200 or $1,200. But since we need to write out the answer, let's go ahead and include a subject and a verb. It cost $1,200. Or you could, because this is a large number, it's fine to write it out using numbers like this. If numerals, if you had a smaller number, like between less than 100, I might write it cost $1,200. But for conciseness, when we have large numbers like this, we'll just use the numerals. Question 3. Excuse me, that was question 3. Question 4. How long you and your team lead adventure tours? So this is an ongoing thing. It's still happening. So we'll ask, how long have you and your team been leading adventure tours? And I see up in the notes, started in 2015. So what year is it now? Let's say it's 2023. So that was 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And so our answer will be, we've been leading adventure tours for 8 years. Now, you could also say, we've been leading tours since 2015. And both of those really, they provide the same information. They both answer the question, so you can do it either way. We will use the contraction. We have contracts to weave. All right, number 5. What trips you take recently? Okay, so recently we're talking about things that are past, but in the recent past. So we can use the present perfect for this. It's something that that the action happened in the past, but it's still affecting the present. So our question will be, what trips have you taken recently? And looking at the notes, I see recent trips. to Costa Rica, Peru, and Alaska. Okay, Costa Rica, Peru, and Alaska. Let's see, how do we want to express the answer? I think just present perfect. We've taken trips. We've gone to, you can say we've gone to Costa Rica, Peru, and Alaska, or we've taken trips to Costa Rica, Peru, and Alaska. And you could say recently, but you really don't have to, because recently is already in the questions. So we probably don't need to repeat that bit of information. And then our last question, how long you write a travel blog. Well, let's see if it's finished or if it's still going on. Looks like this is still going on. In fact, there's reference to this month. So we'll make that present perfect progressive. I'll scoot my text field up a little further. How long have you been writing a travel blog? And we see that that happened, it started last year. And so a couple of ways you could answer it. You could answer it, I've been writing a travel blog for 1 year. Or you could also say, instead of 1 year, you could also say, I've been writing a travel blog since last year. And both are correct. Michael, what's a blog? Blog is it stands for web log. So like a journal for the internet. So it's these two words are pushed together to make the word blog. So that's what a blog is. It's on the internet, and you can find blogs about all kinds of topics. Now, looks like we're not done yet. We're at the bottom of the page, but let's take a look at the top of the next page, because we have a few more questions, just 2 more questions. Question 7 asks, let's see if I can move my screen. There we go. How many people read your blog this month? All right. So this is something that is not past. It is something that is still in progress, because it is still this month. How many people have read your blog this month? And looking back at the notes, he writes 1,000 readers in the first 2 weeks of this month. So you can answer this a couple of different ways. Now, I don't want to start a sentence with a numeral, but I do want to say 1,000. That's how I want to start my sentence. So I'll go ahead and write it, spell it out. 1,000 people have read my blog so far this month, or this month so far. Or you could just say 1,000 people have read my blog. But you should include some reference, some indication that the month is still going on. So it's a good idea to include so far, because that carries the idea that this number can definitely change. And then we have one more question. How many times you visit Africa? So this is a reference to a situation that is over. Let's just go ahead and well, yeah, actually, we know that it is. So this will be present perfect. How many times have you visited Africa? And looking back at the notes. Oh, and we see, 0. So travel to Africa, not yet. So a good answer would be, I haven't visited Africa yet. And there we go. That's exercise 4, and I hope that this has been helpful.